views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. There was a 2005 Daily News editorial called Babies Having Babies in the Bronx that was highly critical, bemoaning in essence a complete breakdown of many Bronx social systems, leading the way to many teen girls having babies. A few years later, the city's Department of Health tackled the issue head-on with a program called New York City Teens Connections. And along with partnerships with a number of Bronx organizations, the program has helped drive the teen pregnancy numbers down. In fact, it was so successful that other boroughs adopted it, and citywide and in the Bronx, teen pregnancy has plummeted 60% over the last 5 years. The work is not over, of course, because there is much to do, but there are many lessons to learn about our culture in the Bronx and the factors that help bring up healthy families and youngsters who learn to make the right decisions for themselves. These are core issues. Please join me in welcoming the director of the New York City Teen Connections program, Estelle Ruboni. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Gary.
And a young lady who is also a participant in the program, Ediana Wallace. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Good. Nice to be with you and chat with you even before the show. Learn a little about you. Makes me feel a lot younger. So thank you so much for coming to the show. Ms. Ruboni, let's start off and just talk about what was that got the Department of Health to say, you know what, we have a real problem here and we better come up with something.
Well, Gary, back in 2000, we had 140 young people per 1,000 girls ages 15 to 19 who were getting pregnant at that time.
10%.
Correct.
Well, it's almost 10.4%.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, very, very high. And then particularly among African American and Latina girls was much higher than the rate for white teens and Asian teens. So we saw it as a problem, and the Department of Health made it a priority. So under Take Care New York 2020, we have a goal of decreasing teen pregnancy rates among communities of color by 35%. And I think we're on our way to there.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about some of those numbers. I mean, and I guess maybe you can fill in the blanks. And I talked about the number that had been given out at 60%. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about 35%, translate that, if you would, into hard numbers so we can get a sense of comparison to the year 2000.
Absolutely. So in 2000, over the past 15 years, we've seen that the teen pregnancy rates decrease by 60%. In some communities, they've decreased a little bit higher. So for instance, in the Bronx, it's decreased by 63%. But when you really drill down into certain communities, there's still a gap. And that's what we're trying to do, is really address the gap between African American teens and Latina teens and white teens.
And when you look at a problem like that, okay, so you look at, I don't know, diabetes or asthma or heart disease or some of the other things that certainly plague us in the Bronx. When you look at a program like teen pregnancy, how do you analyze it and say, well, wait a minute, it can't be like we just distribute more medications, because that's obviously not what it is. And what I said at the outset is certainly true, that these are systemic societal issues. How does a Department of Health look at it, turn that into a health issue, and address it?
Well, we really see what is it that would decrease teen pregnancy. So obviously, if there are fewer teens who are engaging in sexual activity, that's one way. If we are able to provide contraception and really effective methods of contraception. So when you and I were growing up, the pill was the thing. Now the pill is antiquated in comparison to Nexplanon, which is a contraceptive that gets inserted into the arm that's good for up to 3 years, or the IUD, which can be effective for up to 12 years. So essentially, you could be almost vaccinating a young person from becoming pregnant during their adolescence so that they're ready to become parents after they, say, finish college.
That would scare many people because they would say, well, wait a minute, we don't want to start giving license because the behavior that leads to those things is probably not the best kind of behavior either for a young person. So how do you balance the fact that you have the technology, the techniques, whatever, with the fact that you need to develop young people who know how to make good decisions for themselves?
So we work with the DOE. So we're working very closely with the Department of Education. We've trained over 500 teachers in New York City to
Teachers in schools
to implement evidence-based sex ed. So right now, when I went to high school, and I went to JFK High School in the Bronx, you got your health class in 11th grade, which is way too late for most young people. We already know that 15% of 9th graders are already sexually active. So if we're providing health education in 11th grade, we're missing the mark. We have to provide sex education way, way earlier so that young people can make smart decisions about their health.
You've used the word that I thought was really the answer to my question, and that was it's a matter of education.
Correct.
Because no young person is going to know the science, and then of course kind of the personal behavior that you really need because the temptations are out there. I mean, we all know what it's like to be young. So talk to me about, and then we're going to, don't you go away, we're going to bring Ediana into the dialogue. Talk to me about the education piece and how that works, and then of course that will lead right into what Ediana is here to talk about.
So the education piece, we implement evidence-based programs through teachers, so teachers are trained. That is implemented through the health class. It's a 17-session class. It's done in school, so 1 million kids go to school. They have to go to school. And they get paired, every single young person in school gets paired with a high-quality, teen-friendly clinic. So they learn about sex education in school, they learn about condoms in school, how to put on condoms in school, not condoms in school, but they learned how are condoms used, and then they can get paired with a medical provider who can provide further education, services, and other counseling.
That provider is in the school, or that provider is from an external provider of some sort?
Both, actually. So we have a lot of school-based health center partners who actually have a clinic in the school, so that's very easy for a young person to be able to go to school, not have to miss school or have to try to go on a weekend. They can go to the school-based health center, and that provides all the resources that they need.
You know, I have to say, just from the outside, very quietly, so to speak, you have put in what sounds like a massive program. Mm-hmm. In other words, we talk about our schools, and we talk about education, we talk about young people, and we deal with all those things of curriculums and teachers and unions and contracts and everything else, and class size and all that. But literally, very quietly, you have put in a very large infrastructure in order to do that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm not asking you anything, I'm just commenting. That's the way it sounds.
Yes.
Ediana, talk to me a little bit about now you're one of the youth leaders in the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Program. Tell me about how you got involved in the program.
A few years ago, around January 2016, I had been involved in drama with my friends, and it led to me getting arrested and charged with some felonies.
Where you say drama, you don't mean in drama class. Some bad drama in the streets of the Bronx.
There was a fight that I wasn't in, and I was blamed for it.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
It's okay. I was arrested. I had to go to a program called BronxConnect. They're an alternative to incarceration program. And I had met Yvette Perez there, the one who interviewed me, and she said that I would be a great fit for the team, and I've been here ever since. Mm-hmm.
What kinds of activities have you done that you think have been helpful or useful in, not necessarily in teen prevention, but in growing up as a young person? Now, how long ago was that, by the way?
When I was 16, so about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So then tell me what you have gotten out of the program. We'll talk about the pregnancy part in a minute, that has helped you.
I feel like from where I was to now, I feel like I'm better with communicating. I'm better with talking to people about sexual health and helping my friends get the resources that they need to be able to protect themselves. When I came into the program, like I was scared. I didn't want to get condoms. I didn't want to say anything. Like I would tell friends to go for me because I was afraid of them judging me. I was afraid of them saying like, oh, Ediana's getting condoms. Now when I talk to my friends about it, I'm like, why are you so shy? Like it's just sex. It's fine.
Right. It's fine, but also it's going to help you from getting
Yeah.
into a situation that it's going to be, a difficult one to deal with regardless. I mean, those decisions are the next show, but not in this show. Talk to me. So, when I asked you about other things other than sexual health and decision making, you did respond with that you've really learned about talking about, sex education. Is it really so that young people really don't know out there, or they really don't fully understand the implications of their actions out there?
I feel like it varies from person to person, but I feel like people do know. They just don't know how to get to these things. They don't know. They know that there's good information out there. They don't know how to get to that good information.
And I'm guessing that the part that you expressed right up top, that now you're able to communicate, if you can teach them to communicate, then you'll have done something, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Talk to me about the activities. So how do you reach them? You don't go to ring the bell. Hey, it's me, Ediana. I just wanted to talk about sex education with you. How do you go about doing it? How do we engage them so that they will listen to you?
Early summer, we did a consent workshop in the Sonia Sotomayor Community Center around Story Avenue. We talked about what affirmative consent looks like, what consent looks like when it's not given, and unclear consent. So we were helping these people. We did a skit, and we asked people, like, what do you think? Do you think it was clear consent? Do you think it was no consent?
And these were
given?
all young people in the room?
Yes, all of them.
About how many were in the room at the time?
Oh, that's a lot. It was about like 50 to 70.
50 to 75 people?
Yeah.
And these are mostly teens. How
Yeah.
did you get them in the room, or should I ask Ms. Raboni about that?
Ask her.
Ask her? Okay, listen, we'll all follow our kids, I'll tell you that.
There was already an event going on there, and we happened to be one of the people who were doing tables and were presenting there. So it was one of the activities of the day, and they all came to us.
Do you feel that you had effect on some of those people who were in front of you? Or was another one, I get it, that's fine?
Yes, I feel like there was, because during the unclear consent, there was a lot of debate going on in the room. Like, yes, that was consent. People were like, no, it wasn't. And I feel like there was a lot of discussion, and so people learned some things.
Ms. Raboni, what is the challenge? I mean, there are many challenges, but in a way, this is a finished product. She really is able to speak about it. She's had experiences communicating it. To go back to setting it up, how did we get to that point? It must have been an amazing amount of work to educate. And how many young people like Ediana are out
So Ediana is part of a youth leadership team, but we are reaching young people through schools and foster care agencies and youth serving organizations and clinics. Since January of 2017, we've reached almost 13,000 young people.
Wow.
With evidence-based sex ed and
in
services.
the kinds of activities that she was talking about?
In the kinds of activities that she's talking about, but also in schools, in clinics, implementing programs.
How difficult is it in terms of the subject matter to deal with people's preconceptions, people's morality, people's religions? In the Bronx, we have people of every ethnicity, every background. Cultures all feel differently. These are highly personal matters. How do you ride that fine line so that you can do what's appropriate, you can help young people from making good decisions, so they're not necessarily going to have a baby at that time, but still respect people's cultures and ideas?
So young people, parents really care about young people's health and safety. If we approach this topic, which is really what we're doing, by approaching it from a perspective of trying to protect young people's health and safety, parents and adult caregivers are all over that. They're very supportive of that. I will tell you that, first of all, New York City has a sex ed mandate, so the DOE is required to provide sex education, and parents have an option of opting out their students from the programming. And I will tell you, less than 1% of parents do that because they want someone to teach their children about sex ed. They don't necessarily want to be the people that teach them.
It's a little uncomfortable for
they're
them.
They're very uncomfortable about it, and so they're grateful actually that they're getting this information somewhere.
And in a responsible way, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Ediana, do you think, do you know people that you think you have really helped? And if so, give me an anecdote like, gee, I was talking to so-and-so, and they said, wow, you know what I mean? I'm looking for a real story about somebody who you think you really helped.
So this is kind of a funny story.
We like funny stories. That's good.
I had a friend, she was asking about what I do, and she made a joke. She was like, so teach me something. I said, okay, let me teach you how to properly put on a condom. So she was laughing about it, and then a week later she comes to me, and she tells me that when she was with her boyfriend, she did the steps with him and laughing about it, and she found out the condom that they were about to use was expired.
Wow. And she would not have known that
No.
because they would have just dealt with it in some form. And so potentially you saved somebody from a difficult situation. And in a way, I'm going to ask you the same kind of thing that I asked Ms. Ruboni. Does learning about these things, do you think it makes young people more sexually active because they say, well, now I don't have anything to worry about? And it's really the same thing for you. I'm assuming you don't want to encourage them to have sex necessarily, but you want to make sure if they do that they're properly protected. Is that a difficult balance to strike, especially with young people who, you know, I'm sure have great interest in each other?
I feel like it's just preparing someone for what to do in case this happens. It's like going to medical school. Like I don't know if you're actually going to do open heart surgery, but if this happens, this is how you do it. This is how you prepare yourself. This is how you make sure nobody, including yourself, gets hurt. It's not encouraging us. It's telling us, I want you to be safe, and this is how you be safe.
How much?
Can I
you
add
can add
something?
something. I really, her answer is just fascinating. Go ahead.
So even the data suggests the 60% drop is actually attributed to fewer young people engaging in sexual activity.
So it's not just...
It's not just
there's a-
contraception. It's actually young
Wow.
people deciding, you know what, I don't want to even engage in sexual activity. So it's both.
How do you know that?
We actually have the data.
You have
So
the numbers.
there's
Wow.
the youth risk behavior survey that all young people take, and they answer very explicit questions about, you know, are you sexually active? When did you become sexually active? And so we know whether or not young people are deciding to engage in sexual activity or not.
Back to Ediana and what she had said. Ms. Ruboni knows this stuff. She's been doing in this field for 20 years. Maybe I'm going to answer my own question. Isn't it more effective if you do it and you talk to teens as opposed to if she stands in front of a classroom or a group like that? In other words, young people talking to young people. Do you feel like they listen to you?
Yeah, I feel like when I'm in my classroom at school, I had given my friends some advice on birth control, and now for the days going forward, I'm known as the girl that gives advice on birth control and condoms.
So they come to you?
Yes.
Wow. And the other piece I wanted to ask, you talked about the situation you were in before you got involved in the program. You're incredibly articulate. You learned this through this program? I mean, in other words, that helped you come out of your shell and not be the young lady who got in a fight and got in trouble? I'm very serious about it. I think these kinds of dialogues are really important because we do have kids who are getting in trouble. We really would rather they not. What are your thoughts on that?
We actually did a media training.
So you learned how to deal with people like me?
We actually did a media training. The Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island team, we all went to, I believe, the LGBTQ Center on 14th Street. And we learned how to talk to someone who was interviewing us. We learned how to just keep our composure and learn how to dodge questions.
So far, you haven't dodged me, and I'm always very sensitive to it. All right, Ms. Raboni is going to get the same question in a moment. But for you, in terms of convincing people, how do you, I mean, because the tendency would be, and it's out there, to say abstinence, you know, just say no. We've heard it not only in drugs, but in sex. Does that work, and why not just say to people, you know what, if you don't have sex, we won't even have this discussion. Does that work? And if not, why not?
No, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I don't think it works because, for example, something that's illegal, even though it's illegal, there are people that still do it. Just because you're telling them not to do it doesn't mean that it's just going to disappear.
Yeah, the compulsion is still there.
I feel like this is something that's still going to happen. Teens having sex, it's going to happen.
Right.
I feel like if you just tell us no, like someone might be a rebel. They might say, "Oh, you said no, I'm going to do it anyway."
And that is a prevalent attitude among teens, there's no doubt about it. You have a little more history about the history of abstinence theories and philosophies in this country. Let's talk about abstinence only because it's out there now, it's coming up now in our federal government. Talk to me about the viability of those programs.
Well, I mean, I won't talk about theories or myths. I mean, abstinence implemented under the Bush administration was a disaster. Those states that accepted funding to teach abstinence-only sex education actually saw their teen pregnancy rates skyrocket. And in addition to teen pregnancy rates skyrocketing, they saw their abortion rates skyrocketing. New York State was not one of those states that accepted that kind of funding. So we really want to avoid returning to those days where we're really treating teen health recklessly. So that's not a direction to go into.
Let's talk about what's next. I opened the show, and one of the things I said, the work is not done. You've got this, what appears to be very effective program going in the Bronx and throughout the city, started in the Bronx, thank you very much. You know, is the job now to just simply continue this and spread it and reach more people, or are there other components that need to go into it to help grow it, to help reach more people?
We are right now in 145 schools, and those 145 schools are partnered with 80 clinics. We ideally would love to be in every single New York City high school, so we're talking about 484 high schools across New York City.
All right, they do have more to do, I was right.
So there's a lot more to do, but right now what we're looking is to saturate those neighborhoods that have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. So that's most of the Bronx, Central Brooklyn, and the North Shore of Staten Island.
Very much, frankly, like the CompStat program. We say, well, that's where crime is. That's where we have to
Right.
put our resources. What does it take to do that, to reach more schools, to expand the program? And the reason, and I'll just answer my own question on this part of it, the reason to do it is because, you know, young people having babies, it doesn't always work out. It means a load on the family. The child is often not brought up properly. It leads to so many other breakdowns. So what does it take to really reach more people in this way?
I mean, funding. It takes funding. It takes staffing. You know, this current administration, they're cutting the grant that is actually
Federal administration.
Federal administration, yes, correct, is cutting the grant that supports our work.
Oh.
And it's 83% of our budget.
How much money is that?
That's $2 million.
$2 million.
Yeah.
So if you lose that $2 million, you may not even be able to operate what you already have?
Correct.
When would that take place, or what happens?
June 30th of 2018.
And what happens at that point?
Then we would have to
Boy,
stop.
did Gary ask a tough question.
We would either have to stop or rail it back a little bit, because, you know, we would not be able to continue in the way that we do.
And then the cost would be potentially similar things that we saw when I was talking about 2005 and you talked about it in 2000. Talk to me, I'm going to ask you in a different way. Maybe you've never considered it. What do you think needs to be done? Is it just a matter of more young people, or are there other things you think would help communicate proper behavior to young people?
I feel like right now we're doing a good enough job with where we're at. We're doing workshops. We're doing like the fish parade. There was a fish parade in Hunts Point.
And you participated in that?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, what's the value of that? Why do that? And why would you even bring it up now in relation to preventing pregnancy?
I feel like wherever we can find an opportunity to help people, we should.
Right.
That was a parade that led to a bunch of tables where you could go get some information.
So
Yes.
it was almost a hook to...
Yeah.
And of course, fun activities, healthful, productive, fun activities. And now what about for you? Am I allowed to say you work at Yankee Stadium?
Yeah.
Okay, she works at Yankee Stadium. What do you do for the New York Yankees?
I go between cashier and cash manager there.
All right.
I really like it. I like eating the food. It's really good.
And because you did that, they were able to sign the big second base free
Don't
agent,
do
of
that.
course, because Adiana was really working really hard. No, I guess she didn't really have much to do with that. So what? I guess you're monitoring the funding very closely.
Absolutely.
And what would be next for you? Wait and see what happens.
Well, we're exploring all of our options. So looking at private funding, looking at state and city funding. We're just looking to see how we can just make up that missing $2 million. Yeah.
And in terms of engaging more people in it, in other words, if somebody's watching and saying, I have teenagers, I have some young people, or maybe they want to participate in some form, what do they have to do to say, hey, I like what I heard, and I want to do more?
They would go to the newyorkcity.gov/health website, and they would look up New York City Teens, and they would find our website there.
And one other thing I have to ask you, and as you know, I've done all kinds of interactivity with the people over there on Arthur Avenue at the Health Action Center. We got a little bit of time, about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Tell me about why that's it's relatively new, and why having that building on Arthur Avenue is so important and so valuable to the Bronx.
There's so many needs in that particular community. We have high asthma rates, high diabetes rates, high obesity rates. So having the Department of Health and the Health Action Center right there where people need it the most is really significant.
And I'm going to add, because they're not afraid to be innovative, and they're
Correct.
not afraid to identify problems like we did tonight, and put in unique programs.
Absolutely.
That's my personal endorsement. There
Thank
you go.
you, Gary.
Adiana Wallace, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Keep up the good work. Good luck to the Yankees as they get started, and more importantly, good luck to our young people. And let's hope that young people like you, will help them make the right decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Estelle Raboni from the Department of Health, thank you so much for helping to bring a wonderful program that really helps young people in the
Thank
Bronx.
you so much, Gary.
Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show, or anything going on in the Bronx, and email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk, or you post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out our archives at BronxNet.org. You find Bronx Talk by following the Watch menu on the new BronxNet website. Now, we got some really good shows coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Jerome Avenue rezoning, which is going to be voted on by the City Council during the week, and so we'll be able to review that. The week after, we're going to be talking about City Island and do something very interesting and unique with our friends over there in the East Bronx. And then the 2 weeks after that, that would be the 9th and the 16th, we'll be doing debates for both the Senate race that's coming up and the Assembly race. All that coming up on Bronx Talk. Thanks to our producer, who is Helen. Our director is William. And to them and to you, we say good night.